Hey everybody, Steve Biederman. It's July 7th, 2023. Another day. Hope I can give you some good information today to take you into your weekend and the rest of the year in July, of course. So let me talk to you a little bit about what I think is kind of the crux of the matter, maybe the most important piece of what a company offers, which is how do they care? How do they meet their promises? How can a consumer trust what they buy? And how can the employees within the business believe in what they're doing so that they're giving the care? So I tried to not prepare for this one because I this is so deep in me. It's something that's so important to me that I felt like I would be able to give you the best of myself and my experience simply by telling you what's on my mind. So I want to start with the company itself. And how does a company make sure that when they go out and say they're amazing at what they do and they love their customer, that they really mean it? Question: have you ever seen a company go out and say they aren't the best? They have you ever seen a company go out and say they care less rather than more? No. I mean, if you actually look at the advertising or what people within a company say to their potential customers, they're always saying, "We're the best, we're great, we love our customer. There's no one as good as we are." So if you have that assumption that everybody is going to say how good they are, and you're a customer, how do you believe that? How do I believe that everybody cares? Because I'll tell you something. In my own life, almost anyone I have that comes to my home to do something, almost any order I give on websites such as an Amazon or Alibaba or you name it, many of those transactions are wrong. When I order to go food on Uber or DoorDash or what other ones there are, oftentimes, enough times that I think about it as oftentimes, those orders are wrong. Now, all of those companies, I'm sure, are trying really hard to get it right. I don't think anybody's trying not to. So if I have that life experience, and I assume that we all have that life experience, then how do I believe it when every single company says how great they are? Because from my view over many decades of living, the ability to meet my needs when I go to a provider are being met less and less, not more and more. Things aren't getting better. In my opinion, things are generally mediocre. And that's not to say, as I said earlier, that people aren't trying hard. So if I'm a company, what can I do? How can I stand out and be different from other companies and be true to my word? How do I meet my promise? What's interesting is at Noble Biz here, we say that we're the promise keepers. We talk to the public in the sense that the one thing we can assure them is that we'll do our best to keep a promise. So the first message to understand there is it's probably not different from what other customers say, other than the way we say it, is I build systems specifically based on meeting those promises. So first we define, number one, what is the promise that we're going to keep to our client? Number two, what would the client expect? And is it possible for me to say what I'm saying and while giving what I'm giving? So it essentially requires internally talking a lot about the mission, recognizing that what you say to the public is your core value, not just a sidebar to what you do or an extra tagline that you're thinking, but that it's really, really what your speak is. It's your culture. So how do you do that? How do you make a culture that? Well, one of the things you do is you always talk about it. You always talk about it. You define what a promise is. You build your systems and processes to assure it. You physically diagram those processes. And then you secondarily diagram what happens when I fail and what is the approach I use to failure and where are the weak points here. So there's a process side and there's the human side. Now, people care about the outcome, the customer, but they also want to understand or should want to understand, or even if they don't want to understand, you should provide to them this following. If I say I'm a promise keeper to you, let me show you why I say it. And then you literally, not just words alone, like you're creating some general dialogue that will be fancy and make people suck in, but rather what you're going to do is show them your process and explain to them within that process what your approach is when things are not working. Because people generally care less about what your process is when it is working versus the one when they can anticipate it's not working. Because as I said earlier, we can all anticipate things not working. That's become the world we live in today. And that's frankly what we're being compared to. So we must do that. So the question is, am I weak? Am I showing? Am I facing risk if I tell a customer that there will be times that I'm sure sitting here that I may fail you? So when I promise to take care of you to the best of my ability and I'm showing you how, I'm also going to promise you that there may be times that I fail you. Is that a weakness or is that a strength? In my world, it's a strength because it's honest. And so what is the baseline? What is the baseline of caring? The baseline is honesty. It's not giving too much information. It's not saying everything will break. It's not undermining a client's trust. It's just saying to them, I want to talk to you in the real world. Now, when you talk to your team internally outside of the customer, you're saying to them, look, we do have a process and an approach to failure, moments of failure. But at the same time, that is not implied consent, that it's okay. And when we fail, a couple things are going to happen. One is going to be that we're going to go do everything we can to resolve that as quick as we can. And if the internal process we have for failing at something isn't working, we're going to jump in as a human being and recognize that, and we're going to break every rule if necessary to fix the problem. That's not implied consent to fail, and it's not implied consent to break a process. It's a standalone, one time, I have to do this for this customer for this situation. Because the customer in front of you is always more important than the process you have. But it requires a revealing of yourself to the client and a recognition internally that although we face these moments, we don't accept them as it's okay. And when we fail more than once, we examine what we're doing. We examine our process. We don't force a process that we like that's not working for a client. Sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? It's incredibly hard to do. Incredibly hard to do. You know, I built a company and we had hundreds and hundreds of employees, but we started with 2 people years ago. And this was the same approach we used. And what we said in that case was a client gives us a gift when they choose us. It's a gift of trust. And we return that trust with integrity, passion, relentless effort, sound process, integrity. And that's what we lived by and that's what we did. And you know what? When we were small, we did it every time. We did it all the time. Yes, we failed, but we worked hard. We continued to improve. We built the culture. We spoke internally about our core value and we matched our core value against our behaviors. And when we had questions about how to make a decision, we would go back to our core value and bounce each alternative off the core value, and the one that was closest to the core value, that's the one we did. And that is what built us into a company that could essentially afford hundreds of employees and global offices. But here's what I failed at. I failed to understand that when I had third, fourth, fifth, sixth generation staff in my operation, and I went from tens of employees to hundreds of employees, I failed to understand how do I transfer that core value, that uniqueness of who we are, to the next layer of staffing as we grow. And so inevitably what happens is people will come into your company from their experience in other companies. And they've had more than one of those experiences usually. They're not all your first job, right? So they come in and most companies are balancing customer care, not focused their entire core value on customer care. They're balancing it with cost, with investment, with training, with their own choices and their own interests. And they're balancing that against the customer. And so people like that come into your company in that third, fourth, fifth generation, and their experience is different from the first and second generation of your own company that succeeded at it. So the hardest thing, and I've never figured it out exactly, is how do you transfer that thing that was working to this new group of people that I can spend less time with to train, less time with to let them absorb the culture, and less time with an effort understanding that we really mean it. And how do I make sure that they continue to care the way we do it versus the training of their other corporate and business experiences? That's something that we got to figure out. I don't believe that I've seen many companies figure that out. I'm sure there are some, and I'm sure you're thinking of some as I'm talking. And I want to know those because I want to go study those. Because for me, someone relentless about the idea of meeting promises above all else, I sometimes fail. And I have failed in the largest implementation of that to a certain degree. And when a customer starts to say to me, hey, Steve, what happened to you? You've gotten so big now. You're so important to yourself that you don't seem to care as much about us. Then you know you've really not yet succeeded in figuring it out because your heart's in the same place, right? So how does a customer though know that you're gonna be true to your word here? Well, one, I mean, they should ask to talk to some of your customers that you have failed with. Not, I mean, I want to talk to 3 of your customers is meaningless in my opinion. It's me going out and saying on LinkedIn, as an example, who has used this service in this way and had a bad experience. I'd love to talk to you. And it doesn't mean about to buy. It means that I'm going to understand the truth and the reality. So let's kind of revisit and summarize. The idea internally in a company is to sit strongly with your core value. Make it a straightforward value, focused singularly on the client. Balance your processes, approach, and all decisions towards the core value first, so that you can be sure that ultimately the client comes first. Then speak internally, talk, focus, 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 insist, 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 improve, improve, improve. And when the process itself is failing, then be human and recognize what's in front of you is more important than the process itself. And last, be honest before you sell your customer. Tell your customer when things don't work, how you behave. Ask your customer, your potential customer, if they want to talk to some of our more troubled clients, and if they want to understand what we do and how we behave when in fact things are not working. Because usually what will come out of that is those customers that have had their struggles but are still with you, they're not going to say these people are terrible. They're going to say these people may not have done it right all the time, but they're always there. They always care. And man, that is a group of people that try harder than anybody I've ever been around. Because at the end of the day, the truth is, outside of perfection, which often doesn't happen, that's what's important to the client. So with that, let's have dialogue. Let's talk about this. Let's show our openness and vulnerability. And next week, I'm going to be out of the country. I'm going to be traveling around the world on business, and I'm going to share some spontaneous videos with you everywhere I go. So look forward to seeing a bit of Europe. All right. You all take care. Bye-bye.